Synchronization is one of the most important skills we have to learn when we're automating on the web, APIs, anywhere. So I'm going to show you a site that you can use to practice on and a new online course that I've got that covers all the examples using this particular site. So this is the sinkhole. You can find it on eviltester.github.io/sinkhole, and it's a small app with a bunch of harder to synchronize things. So we've got stuff that's controlled by CSS, where you have to click on the link, simple form submission, where when you submit forms, various things happen with JavaScript when you get to the other side, buttons that are added dynamically onto the page that you have to wait for things to happen, events that are going on which are hard to synchronize, messages going back and forward to the server that we have to wait for, and different ways of synchronizing on this. So there's different combinations of WebDriver wait, using JavaScript, synchronizing with expected conditions, making our own conditions, using various other implicit waits or explicit waits. Cover a ton of stuff on this course over on LinkedIn Learning. And there'll be a link to it from my website. If you have a look at the online courses there, I'll have a link in the video description somewhere. But I mean, synchronization, very often I see teams using one or two approaches. And what we really want is to understand as many different approaches to synchronization as we can, so that we have a lot of variety open to us when we're faced with real life problems. So I've tried to look at all the different things that I tell teams, different ways that we can approach synchronization, and I've crammed it into this course. It's all pretty much hands-on lectures. So you see me coding, writing code to deal with the things in this small application. And I'm explaining the theory as we go through the pros and cons. When does WebDriver itself synchronize on the page? How much JavaScript does it synchronize on? How does WebDriver know when something is loaded, when it hasn't? And what's the difference between an implicit wait and an explicit wait? And how do we harness that in WebDriver? And what are the inbuilt synchronization classes, and how do we use them? How do we write our own custom synchronization points? How do we harness JavaScript and use that to synchronize effectively on the page? This is really important when it comes to modern web applications that are doing lots of AJAX calls to the server or dynamically updating the front end. I look at external libraries that we can use. So because sometimes there's a temptation when we're using WebDriver and in combination with an API to use WebDriver to synchronize on the API or the file system. There are other libraries that we can use that may be more appropriate, so I cover those in this course as well. General hints and tips on working with remote WebDriver, and just kind of summarizing all the stuff we go through. So I cover a lot. It doesn't take much to introduce a synchronization problem. Anyone that's worked on a project will see that there are flaky tests, builds that run and don't run. Very often people move code into frameworks but don't synchronize effectively because we've lost it. People are worried about putting too much synchronization in their code in case it slows it down. Cover a ton of stuff in here. I think it's one of the most important things that we have to learn when we work with WebDriver. But you can use the sample application on its own, the sinkhole, eviltester.github.io/sinkhole, if you want to practice. And if you want to really learn it in detail, we've got the course on LinkedIn Learning, so you can work through that and see. But do focus on synchronization. Do examine the synchronization approaches that you've got. Look at the source code that's in WebDriver and see how they synchronize, and adopt more options rather than fewer. Don't rely on just one or two approaches. And if you find that your tests are flaky, don't use retry mechanisms. Instead, figure out how to make your code as well synchronized on the application state as possible to avoid having retry mechanisms or just failing tests, failing builds that run next time, because that can reduce the trust in your automated execution. But hopefully that's a quick overview of the course, but do have a look at the application and see how far you get. But synchronization is essential for our effective WebDriver automating.